This is an Audio Realms, Audiobooks Plus presentation of Elric of Melnibone by Michael Moorcock, read by Jeffrey West. Dramatic introduction by the author.
And so the great emperor received his education. Learning his wizard's craft on the dream couches, where one might live 1,000 years in a single night, Elric was trained in the ancient traditions of Melniboné's sorcerer kings. No mortal could learn all there was to learn in a single lifetime, and thus it was that the lords of the Bright Empire conceived a means by which their sons might gain all their inherited wisdom, a wisdom of millennia. These sons, and sometimes daughters, dreamed the long dreams of Imria the Beautiful, the dreaming city. They made pacts with the great elementals of fire, water, air, and earth. In these dreams, while they lay upon the dream couches of the dreaming city, they consorted with demons, with angels, and with violent, desperate men, with cruel warlocks, powerful witches, and all manner of supernatural beings. In these dreams they walked with the denizens of hell, and made bargains with the lords of chaos, even indulged in compacts with the dukes and duchesses of law. In sublime terror they made love to the undying. With horrible joy they made war against the never-to-be-born. They explored the corridors of measureless palaces and wandered through unmappable landscapes without horizon or end. They journeyed beneath the earth into the lands of sunless crystalline beauty, where vast glowing rivers roared and strange unhuman beings ruled. They walked the moonbeam roads, the astral roads between the worlds. They fell into burning suns and froze on silver moons. They learned the histories of all their pasts and all their futures. In these dreams, no pain was unfamiliar to them. No pleasure went untasted. Dream followed dream. Knowledge was heaped on knowledge, terror on terror, and joy on joy. And by this means they learned their magic, their power over all men and all the forces of nature. They learned to summon great winds, to throw fire, to raise the waters, to break the very surface of the earth. They learned to destroy the living and to resurrect the dead. They learned to survive dangers no ordinary mortal might ever hope to experience and live. Not all survived. Many died on the dream couches, trapped in some nameless spell, victims of some voracious immortal, torn apart by unimaginable creatures, destroyed by some appalling force. Of course, no mortal brain could absorb so many experiences or hold so many memories and remain sane. And it was frequently argued that there were few sane emperors of Melniboné. Was Elric sane? Elric of Melnibone, son of Sadric, would never be certain of his own sanity, nor indeed of his own moral choices. These were questions forever in his conscious mind, filling his waking hours, just as the terrors and wisdom of his dream quests remained in his unconscious mind to disturb his sleeping hours. Elric of Melnibone had received the most rigorous education of all. For almost every hour of his lifetime he had lived 10 years upon the dream couches. Those who saw a young man just reaching maturity could not possibly know, unless they had experienced it themselves, what an ancient, near immortal dwelled within. Yet in some ways, in the ordinary ways of the world, its certainties and its deceits, Elric was a young man. He had a young man's ambitions, a young man's ideals, a young man's need for spontaneous action, for love, and for adventure. Elric's dreams had not dulled his taste for life. They had taught him sorcery more than teaching him conventional manners. Though he had the courtliness and grace taught to all Melniboné aristocrats, though his own stock of irony was not small, and his own powers of observation not minor, yet he was still an untried creature whose vast, sorcerous power was balanced by his own moral uncertainties. Elric's dream quests were recalled as nightmares, the vaguest of disturbing memories, interruptions of the sleeping mind. But what he had learned on those quests remained: sorcerous and military arts of complex depth and variety, arts which something in him feared to use, for he instinctively understood their destructive power. When one day Elric's father died suddenly, brought low by deep melancholy and too many disappointments, having failed to reinvigorate an empire which had grown lazy with its own great might, Elric was forced to consider his inheritance. He was now natural successor to the throne of ancient Imrir, a responsibility he was not sure he could fulfill. And Elric was not the only one to doubt his own abilities. Some said he was not suited for the task, that he had deficient blood, impaired strength, weak eyes, and an unstable mind, such as marked earlier so-called Silver Emperors, the white-haired, crimson-eyed albinos whose strange condition marked them out in the long line of sorcerer emperors and empresses. Some, who supported another contender for the throne, said this Silver Emperor, who conversed with humans as if they were equals, who had human friends as well as alliances with demons, would bring the empire down. It was predicted, they said, though these predictions, when challenged, proved to be somewhat numinous. Elric's succession would cause the defences of Imrir to tumble, they said. He would allow the human hordes to flood in. These hordes had grown powerful and longed to sack the city of the Dragon Lords. They hated these lords who had ruled them for so many millennia. They longed to loot, to destroy, to rape. These voices warned that Elric was fated to be the very last of his ancient line, a prince of ruins and desolation. Even Melniboné's greatest power, the huge dragons asleep in the dragon caves far below the dreaming city, the dragons who dripped fiery venom upon their enemies, even these would not defend the bright empire against the threat of those nations they called the young kingdoms, the upstart nations of a new and changing world. Some of Elric's own party, often the wisest, argued that Melniboné had grown too certain of herself, too proud to make alliances with those who refused vassalage, too arrogant to call upon the emergent nations and respect them as brothers rather than clients. In her lofty pride lay the seeds of her own doom. Even as she rose to her greatest power, Melniboné was already facing destruction. But this was not talk Elric's enemies cared to hear. Rather, they blamed him alone for any dangers Melniboné might face. And they championed his cousin, the swaggering warrior prince Irkun, who promised them glory, who promised them new wealth, who promised them a kind of immortality. Irkun, too, had learned his sorcerous craft upon the dream couches, though not with Elric's patience. He saw that his power lay not in wisdom, but in strength. He placed all his ambitions in the blade of his sword. And so they schemed, these various parties, some for Elric, some for Irkun, some for themselves. There were those who loved their strange country as passionately as any patriot loved their country. There were some who cared little for Melniboné, but sought personal advancement. There were others who calculated the security of their nation and saw Elric as too weak to defend them while loving the man himself. Some hated him and his dependence on drugs to survive at all, yet revered his lineage as the true blood of ancient Melniboné. They would support him no matter what arguments were brought against him. Still others spoke of ridding Melniboné of kings and aristocrats and founding a fresh republic, as had once ruled the dreaming city. And all of these and more gathered at the great court of emperors to scheme behind their hands, to whisper of betrayal and support, of wisdom and folly, and plot the dominance of this party or that. Over all of them the young emperor must preside with due ceremony and pride. Over all of them he must appear dispassionate and distant. And now there is no turning back at all. Elric's destiny has been forged and fixed as surely as the hell swords were forged and fixed aeons before. Was there ever a point where he might have turned off this road to despair, damnation, and destruction? Or has he been doomed since before his birth, doomed through 1,000 incarnations to know little else but sadness and struggle, loneliness and remorse, eternally the champion of some unknown cause?